Welcome to GateCrashers, a podcast dedicated to kicking open the doors to your next favorite thing. Our mission, our creed, our code is this: to make all things nerdy more approachable and accessible for everyone. We want you to find a universe that you're going to fall in love with. Here we go. You ready?
We are joined by another dynamic duo, Jackson Lanzing and Collin Kelly, who co-wrote many a thing together, such as Joyride, Grayson, Harbinger, and Dark One. How are you two doing today?
We're great, man. Thank you so much for having us.
Doing fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
We were very excited to have you on. Jake suggested it when he started reading Joyride, and I was like, all right, I'll make it happen. And somehow it happened. So
you did.
Yeah, we're all here.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for reading Joyride, for one.
Loved it. Loved it.
That means the world to us. That book is still our, it's our only creator-owned, full series. Zojicon was a mini. Joyride was the only one that we
do some more.
Oh, we are.
Ooh.
It's just creator owns a slow process, and it's a money investment. It's a time investment. And Collin and I have the sort of fortunate or unfortunate, depending on your perspective, we have this career that lets us work in a lot of different mediums. So we're sort of like pitching television shows at the same time as we're writing movies, at the same time as we're writing comics. And creator-owned comics really take all the time that you have. And so until we have unless it's like exactly the right thing at exactly the right time, we try not to just we don't want to do creator-owned to do creator-owned. We want to do it when it's ready for it to be as awesome as it can be. So we have several books in pipeline and at either already sort of at a publisher or in the process of moving there or just working with an artist to create something killer. But we're really meticulous about when we do those,
right?
Just because if we flood the market with creator owned, we're not doing ourselves or our readers any favors. We want to make sure that it's just going to be stuff that we love.
Mm-hmm. Well, and at one point when actually Joyride was going around and we were doing conventions and, working with our friends at Boom, one day we were tabling with Cy Spurrier, who's a lovely gentleman. And he kind of sat us down and we were like, Cy, do you have any thoughts? He's a little bit of an elder statesman. We have absolute respect for him.
He's going to hate that we called him an elder statesman.
Well, I know
he's
not that much older than we are. No. But he said effectively, don't rush it. Right. Do your big two stuff, build the brand, build the identity, and then bring those fans to your creator-owned work, because otherwise you're just another voice in the crowd. You have to bring your audience with you and don't rush it. So we took that really to heart, and we've been spending the last few years really building that audience and luckily finding fans who like work such as Joyride. So thanks for being part of that cavalcade.
No problem.
That's a really interesting way to think about the whole thing, doing the big two and then doing the other kind of stuff afterwards. Especially because there's so many people who end up doing that. Such an interesting dynamic when you think of you want to do your own stuff to then get into the big two.
A lot of it comes down to investment, right? And sort of when you drop into big two. We got very lucky, extremely lucky, because what was happening for us on Joyride was when we started that book, our editor on that book, Rebecca Taylor, and this gets very inside baseball, so I'm happy to sort of make it short. But Rebecca Taylor, who was our editor on that book, who is still just one of the great comic book editors of all time, just a wonderful, incredible editor. And if you look up her work, you'll see that she's just been in charge of a million things you've loved. She went from Archaea to Boom, and then when she was at Boom, she got Joyride sort of picked up and sold and ready to go. And then she got taken in at DC and went over to the Bat Office at DC. And it was really because of her and because of James Tynan that we ended up over at, who was just a fan of ours who tabled with us and said the same thing. Had been like, do you guys ever want to do big two? And it was like, I mean, sure, someday maybe somebody will let us do a superhero. And then James and Tay worked together to get us onto Batman and Robin Eternal, which was our first DC work. It was Tay that put us on Grayson. And that got us introduced to enough of the infrastructure at DC, to the editors at DC, that we were taken seriously there, probably well before we would have been otherwise. I mean, certainly well before we would have been otherwise. Like, otherwise we'd still be, effectively doing as many joyrides as possible. That would have been then the only move, would be to do a bunch of creator owns and just try to build the brand there. And that's an awesome way to do it. I love it. And certainly it lets you get a lot of your great ideas out there first, but it's also just an enormous time and money investment. And at the time that we were doing Joyride, I mean, Collin and I were living paycheck to paycheck. Like, there was no chance that we could produce a second book, because we didn't take any dollars on Joyride. Like, Joyride was, every single penny of Joyride went to Marcus Toe so that he could draw that book, because we were keeping him from doing Big 2 work. And as long as Marcus was on Joyride, he needed to be taken care of like he was doing a Big 2 book. Otherwise, it just was unrealistic for him, right? So we just kind of got lucky. We ended up at Big 2 early. We ended up at DC early. And that became this really nice process for us of being able to then cut our teeth there, learn the ropes there, learn the, frankly, sometimes brutal world of DC, or not DC, but like superhero comics in general, learning how to work inside these larger universes. And now I think we've come out the other side of that, steel sharpens steel, right? Like, we're way better than we were when we first stepped in there. Even if we did first step in there being like, we know everything, we're the best, yeah, we're going to do this. And then we very quickly learned, you know nothing. And it was great. It was good.
Do you guys like how you literally just welcomed us to your show, and effectively we just answered, I'm sure, what was the first 4 questions that you had prepped for us?
I have never, so normally we get right into our questions. Not once has anyone ever beaten us to telling us about themselves or not touched on a single question we have at all. So
nice.
Yeah.
That is extremely creative.
How about we ask you questions?
We are chaos agents.
I'm always
Check it
waiting
out
for someone to turn that table on Jake and I, and us just being like,
I mean, that has happened based on our first question.
Yes. Oh, Jake, that was an ultimate segue. So we're hard-hitting journalists. So we always start off with probably the hardest question. What's your favorite sandwich?
Ooh.
Hell yeah, bud. Yes. Good. Okay. Now we're doing this.
Yeah, we can get into this. Collin, you lead off.
Yeah, so I'm a real classic man, right? There's a lot of great sandwiches out there. You can get some roasted bell peppers. You can get some steak with some chimichurri. You can get yourself a good pretzel bun. But I got to be real, for me, you got to go classic. It's all about that BLT life, especially if you can get some nice thick cut heirloom tomato, some of that fat, thick bacon. Some people think a little mayo is controversial. I don't. I think it's all but necessary. But where I will deviate is a nice slathering of avocado. I think the BLTA is a elegant and elevated example of maybe God's perfect sandwich.
I'm going to have a really hard time not just repeating that answer, because now I want a BTLA, real bad. BLTA, I said that all wrong. But for me, it's all about the Italian sub. I think it's I'm a cold cuts man. If you give me a charcuterie plate, I will demolish it. So it's like somebody took a charcuterie plate and a bunch of spicy shit, which is also my jam, and just put it all into the same thing and just let me shove it into my face. Italian sandwiches all day long, forever. Even though one of them is about as much food as you need for several days. I'll just have 7 of them, please. Let's go.
Did you 2 practice this? How did that just come out? So
we're pitchers, dude.
You think we write comics? No, we write sandwich reviews. Of course, we have a pseudonym at the time that we were work under, so you did not know that about us. But
see if you can find our sandwich reviews somewhere on the internet. That's the first quest.
All right, so you 2 probably have some of the best dynamics that I've ever heard, seen, or read between two creators.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
You probably get asked a lot, like how you met and all that kind of stuff. But what is it like working together? Do you share what in normal times? Do you ever share a space to create, or do you just do it on a Google Doc?
So in normal times, we do share a space. And a lot of that comes from the fact that our partnership was born out of friendship rather than out of like creative collaboration. Collin and I weren't independent creators who then were like, oh, let's create together. We didn't have like laundry lists of stuff that we had done ourselves before we started working together as a unit. We met in college. And we were working together. I mean, literally, like within 3 months of graduating, we had written our first script together, and had sort of decided at that point that was just what we were going to do for a while. And like, who knows how long that was going to last? But like, let's try and do this because we have a pretty good dynamic, and we can produce a lot faster with the two of us.
And it wasn't even a conscious choice, right? It was really just we were coming out of that friendship. You know, if you have two creators, two storytellers, and they're friends, they're going to start telling stories together. And then pretty soon we actually just landed on a story that we liked so much. We realized we couldn't just run off and one of us go write it or each of us go write our own version. We were like, well, this is ours, you know, from the start, from the core. So we have no choice but to write this together. And then as Jack pointed out, as soon as we got into it, it was both the best and easiest process we had ever experienced in creating in writing anything. So once you hit on that something that's like that quality, right? Once you find your BTLA, if you will, you can't go back.
And so what happened then was it took us a few years of, you know, being in our early 20s and not knowing what the hell we were doing. And like, we sold a couple of movies and like tried to figure out our stuff, and, you know, nothing got made. It was just, we were like working screenwriters. And that process was so sort of chaotic and strange. And I'd done like one comic, or a couple comics actually, with our friend David Server, who was the guy who introduced us, who doesn't really write as much anymore, but is like a really wonderful manager. He manages actually a lot of really great comic creators. He's a wonderful dude. So Collin and I, once we had the opportunity to write comics and we realized that it was going to be on kind of a schedule, right? And we knew we needed to start having a real regularity to the way that we worked. We set a process in place whenever Hacktivist came out. So that was like 2014, something like that, 2015. So 5-6 years ago, though we've been working together for about 10 years. We set a process about 6 years ago that was every single Thursday, every Thursday night. So from about 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. and every Sunday from between noon to 1:30 p.m. to whenever we had to be done. So normally like 6 or 7 p.m. We worked together in the same space. Like he came over to my place or I came over to his place, you know, and for certain weeks I would get Thursdays and he would get Sundays, or then I would get Sunday, or, you know, just depending on what was going on in our lives and what we needed at the time. Mm-hmm. And we would make sure that we were there. That gave us the time to ideate, talk through stuff, figure out what we liked, brainstorm, just have the general, like the thing that got us into this in the first place, which was being friends and nerding out about Batman. It was just now we were doing it professionally. And then the second half of that was, okay, now you got to work. And rather than sitting there working alone, where you can do that Charlie Kaufman thing and be like, no, I'll only work if I have a muffin. Okay, now I'll work if I make myself a sandwich. Okay, now I'll work if I, you know, you have the other guy on the other side who's like, no, I'm working, so you better work.
Work, nerd.
Yeah, and that kept us able to produce at a rate. It meant that when one of us came up with a problem, we could turn to the other one and be like, hey, so like, does this work? And they'd be like, oh, no, but maybe this works. And you're like, oh yeah, that's great. And then you fix it. That's become our process. And we've kept it. Like we really like don't let each other off the hook outside of like vacations that we'll schedule. And we'll be like we have one coming up on the 15th. It's like after the 15th until the end of the year, we're not writing. And that's going to be wild because we have not had a vacation in, I don't know, all of 2020. 2020 has been wild.
A vacation from like work, Jackson.
Yeah.
Right, like we get
we'll
to just
still hang out. We'll just be friends.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. We get to just like hang out. I get to take a vacation from my work Jackson and hang out with my friend Jackson, which is going to be real nice. I like that guy a lot.
Yeah, I'm an asshole when we're at work, but I'm really
terrible.
fun I'm really good as a friend.
I think there's a great story. I think that Jack's wife likes to tell, which is one day we were working together, and effectively, obviously, like all good creative partnerships or any kind of partnership, really, sometimes you fight, right? Sometimes you're very passionate about your idea, and really the only way to find a solution for it is just to scream at each other for a good 3 or 4 hours. Just really hooting and hollering and all sorts of name calling and just being real jerks. And she, was kind of, listening to this and being like, "Oh my God, is this the end of things? Are they done?" And then eventually she heard us both shout, "That's a great idea! I agree! That is a great idea!" And then we sat.
And then just silence for like an hour while we wrote the thing. And then he left, and she turns to me and goes, "What was that?" I was like, "Yeah, that's the process." She was like,
chaos.
You guys are chaos. Yeah, you're wild." But that's sort of the thing, right? Why I always look at it as and why we use the term hive mind. It's not like a marketing tool. It's the best possible way to describe what we do, because when I work individually, my work is very different than the work that I do with Collin. And when Collin works individually, his work is very different than the work he does with me. Like the voice that we've cultivated, the voice that you can see in every book we've written, is a unified voice. And I really challenge anybody to look at it and be like, that page was written by Collin, or that page was written by Jackson. Like that exists to us. Like, we might be able to tell that, maybe. I think it's very, very hard for someone outside of our ecosystem to tell that. And that's why it's become, it's why we split every paycheck, right? Like if this were something that we could do solo and individually and still get the kind of work that we want to get and the kind of work that we're known for and do that, like, yeah, maybe we'd both be doing like solo books all over the place. But that's not really how it works for us, at least not yet. That's really how we work, is we bring the minds together, and that hive mind actually produces the work.
Yeah. And I don't know if you guys are big. I don't know if you guys are big online gaming folks, but one of the truth of the matter is, like, look, it's a social setting, and it's better to play with friends.
We
always have to apologize to Sony when we're playing PlayStation.
we play together as our team on Saturdays, and it's probably the place where we get most things done. Like, we could just riff and talk about things and do weird pitches and sing way too much, or that's just me.
And that's not just you. No, you sing during the podcast. I sing during game chats. And it's always something the same thing in a weird voice.
No, except the "Busted Makes Me Feel Good" from Ghostbusters.
Busted makes me feel good.
That's he wrote that on purpose, right? Like, you think that couldn't have been?
Oh yeah, no, that wasn't a.
Yeah, he knew. He got it.
He knew.
He gets it.
You got two big Neil Cicerraga fans on the line here. So like, we listen to the bustin'. It happens a lot.
Didn't know that existed until I found out this line existed, because like I was listening to Ghostbusters casually. I was like, he wrote this line, "Bustin' makes me feel good," and just left it in the song, in like one of the most iconic novelty songs of all time. Like, people know this one, and it's just a line that just goes unnoticed, and someone linked me that.
It's pretty.
Someone definitely noticed.
If they let kids listen to Monster Mash, I don't think it's a big problem.
Yeah.
Don't get me started on Monster Mash, please. It was my number one Spotify song from last year. Like, you know, everyone's like putting out there, like, this is my Monster Mash. Unironically, was my number one song. I love the Monster Mash. It's so much fun. Like, just imagine all these like different monsters hanging out, drinking beers, like playing beer pong.
It's great. It's the only song where somebody had to walk into a room and pitch, like, what if all of these IP characters had a party? It's like such a weird pitch. It's like the MCU of songs. And it happened like in like the 30s. It's like insane.
So much for questions.
Yeah, bring us. Come on.
Yeah,
Bring us another one. What else you got?
Let's see.
But not that one. Pick the next one.
Okay, I'm actually going to do that.
Flip them.
Yep. So this came from someone on our writing team. Your Green Arrow run was cut short far before its time. Would you like to return and continue the story where you were building, or has that time passed?
I think that time has passed. I think, and not. I don't say that as somebody who doesn't want to tell stories about Ollie and Dinah. We do. We love them. They're wonderful characters. And we were honored to have the time that we, had on them. I think about everything that I have to say about this, I said on a very ill-advised Twitter thread, that if you really want to know our thoughts on this, you can go and you can check that out. It certainly caused us enough trouble. But I think the thing about that book ultimately is that what we got to do, I thought, was really one of the best challenges that we've had in comics. And our time at DC has been filled with some really interesting challenges. Wrapping Grayson is not an easy thing. And it's not a thing.
Question I actually skipped.
Yeah. Well, and it's not a thing that we would have, said like, oh, we're up for this. Right. Like that was my favorite book when it was being produced. I just thought it was absolutely incredible. And I was very vocal about it. And then one day we just got an email from Rebecca Taylor being like, hey, so Tom King's going to go write Batman and Tim Seeley's going to go write Nightwing and somebody needs to finish Grayson. Well, you guys come finish Grayson. You have 3 issues to finish their plan. But their plan was longer. So like, can you do it in 3? And we don't say no to Rebecca Taylor. Like it just doesn't happen.
The only answer is yes, but then we're handled effectively like go ahead and do the climax, drop the 3rd act of what is arguably DC's best book at the time, and do honor to the 2 people who you are not only becoming friends with, but like who you really consider kind of like icons and mentors in a lot of ways. Like go ahead, just pick up the ball. No big deal.
Yeah. Like, so
you both just answered that question that
it's kind of a prelude to the Green Arrow question, because Green Arrow was very similar. Green Arrow was come in and pick up this book that like, again, our friends were writing. The Bensons had been on it. They're wonderful people. We've known Julie and Shauna Benson since well before either of us were writing comics. And we were like, so come in, pick up the ball from them, but also make sure that you are dealing with No Justice, which has just put this really big thing into Ollie's hands, and make sure that you're dealing with the fallout from Heroes in Crisis, where Ollie's best friend has died. And all of this stuff is all going to happen, right here between like 48 and 50. And then starting in 51, we'll kind of pick up our stuff. And then, we got canceled at 50. So 48, 49, and 50 became our opportunity to work in event comics. Basically, to like learn how event comics worked and to learn how you take stuff from these various events and move them together and mold them together into something that is useful and interesting and emotional and viable and would be something that we'd want to read. And so I go back, I think those 3 books stand up against anything we've written. I'm really, really proud of those books, even if they had extremely difficult circumstances that they were kind of built on. Our original pitch for Green Arrow, what we would have done with that book, we were never going to get to do. Like we knew that well before the book was canceled. It was the thing that got us the book was also just, it was too political and too kind of out there to really like do at DC at the time.
I don't know if it ended up on the recording can hear it, but when you initially asked this question, I made a little scoffing noise, a little like gleeful, because it's actually quite amusing.
We love, so what we pitched as Green Arrow, which I don't want to get into because someday we will maybe pitch it, a lot of it came true this year. Like physically, actively was in the news and was a thing that was happening in the country all over the place. And it just happened like in Seattle, like in the place that we were pitching it. So because we went to Seattle to come up with the Green Arrow pitch, we looked around, we talked to people, we like thought about Seattle as a place. We broke down a map. We had this whole idea of like doing a Seattle book because Collin's from there.
Yeah.
And
outside of Seattle, I'm like, it's Seattle, like by, I'm from a suburb, but.
And we were like, hey, we're gonna do this thing. And we were sort of told like, look, this is a swing too far. Probably can't do this, but maybe you could do something else. And we came up with a great pitch that we were very happy with in where we were taking it. And whether or not we'll tell that story, I think that time is probably past. Yeah, that original pitch, I very much hope someday we get to do it. And whether or not it happens in Green Arrow or not is a question, but it's a great pitch and it should happen somewhere. And Green Arrow is the right character for it if we do it at DC.
And like to circle back around a little bit, just like if we got the opportunity to write more Green Arrow, would we do it? Oh, hell yeah. Ollie Queen is amazing. Like his entire cast is fantastic. Like, as you probably know from a lot of our work, we hate fascists pretty seriously. And so's Ollie. Like he is straight to our heart of the things that we really care about. And we think that especially the DCU can really need. Like, as we said in our series, he's this grounding human element that still steps up every day and shoots arrows like an asshole. Like, but he still
the pointy kind.
Yeah, pointy kind, but he still shows up. So like we love Ollie. The only thing that I am bummed about, and I just don't think we'll ever really get to do it, is I really wanted to take Ollie to a fantasy kingdom so he could shoot arrows at a dragon.
Yep. We had a whole little pivot we wanted to do for a while where we were just going to go do effectively a Thor story with Ollie, and that was going to be really fun, and we still would love to do it someday, just because he's such a perfect fantasy hero. Except for his personality, which is like not at all a good fantasy hero, and that's what makes him so
good. Exactly. And every single D&D campaign I've ever played, I always play a ranger. I'm just obsessed with rangers. Those poor, terribly balanced boys, but Ollie is like my heart song for that. So anyway, that's aside.
But I will say, a good chunk of what we wanted to do spiritually with Green Arrow is now being done at Valiant for the Harbinger. So like, if you're curious about like tonally and sort of spiritually what we wanted to do with Green Arrow, pick up the Harbinger. Like that book that's what we were going to do, like not plot wise, but spiritually in terms of what the book is about, that's what it was going to be.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much going on in our world, so much going on in our culture. And if you will exist in a world with superheroes, to not address it you're doing the cultural moment a real disservice.
Depending on the hero, it's okay. Like, I don't know.
No, not every.
I think it's okay to not be political in superheroes.
Not
it's just
every hero. I'm not saying every hero needs to, but like if if it is a world with heroes, it's important for at least one hero to step up and really start to look this in the face. And I think that's what we were really, when Valiant offered us, or rather invited us to tell some ideas or pitch some stories, we thought it was really awesome that was the one that they said, yes, absolutely, let's throw down.
So you did hit on something I was going to talk about later with Harbinger, about the energy you're going to be bringing to that kind of book. And it seems like it's going to be pretty fuck fascism, a lot of that.
Yes.
And I interviewed you for CBR about this, but I get to ask you as humans now. Are you looking to branch the series out with different thematics like that rather than stick to what has been done in previous runs, or you're taking inspiration from them and then injecting your flavor?
I talked a lot previously. You want to start this, Collin?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, we have you gotta build the runway before you can fly the plane. That makes sense. So we're going to kind of focus on our main themes to begin with, but it's going to be much more than that kind of that anti-fascist rebel yell that we do love so much. That's definitely going to be the flavor and the tone, but really it's going to be a story about Peter and about facing both who he was and who he wants to be, right? It's not about just getting wrapped up in giant themes. You have to maintain the character, the person at the heart of this. And I think that's going to be really our focus. And then as our story cracks open and we start really going to some more, some interesting and unexpected places, no matter where we take it, Peter is always going to be at the heart of this thing. He's our North Star when it comes to that book. And we really just need to make sure that we're doing him the service that he deserves. Everything we do is going to have a certain amount of Antifa, like that's the age of the time we live in, right? We have to, it's in superheroes DNA, right? You have to topple the people, the forces in this world that are insurmountable, that take advantage of, that abuse the people who are unable to fight for themselves. That's every superhero, right? That's the zeitgeist. That's the moment. But with Peter, we have this opportunity to really come in at the ground level and find someone who's really has a troubled past and really fits into this in a new and kind of different way. So we're really excited to take it on.
I think it's exciting about Peter, especially in regard or in relation to Ollie Queen, right? Ollie Queen is a guy who early in his life was shown what an asshole he was and made a conscious choice that turned him into a superhero to not be an asshole anymore. Like he sort of was like, I gotta be better, forged himself into something better, and then came back as that better person. And then his struggle every day is, how do I maintain being the best version of myself in a world where all the other best versions of people are Superman and Wonder Woman and like these like monoliths. And I am a guy who shoots arrows. Always love that. Will always love that. Just think that that's such a great character. And that's what drove our Green Arrow run. Peter's character is, there's a story, I think, that gets to this really easily. When I first got into the new Harbinger run, I used to read the old Harbinger run as a kid. I don't think I understood the degree to which Peter was like a total screw up back then. You know, I was like an early teenager. So to Peter was kind of this like, oh, I want to be that guy. That's awesome. He can do whatever he wants. But you know, with some adult years on me and some mistakes in me and some reckoning with my own masculinity and all this other stuff, I can look back at Peter and be like, oh, wow, he's really a problem. So too, I think, did Josh Dysart, who we just absolutely love and respect and who I just have the most, we're so honored to be taking over the book from him. Or really to be picking up his story because he did his thing and it's incredible. But Josh has this very fearless way of looking at Peter, which was Peter isn't going to be the best version of himself right away. That rather Peter's going to make all the mistakes in the book. We're going to watch him brainwash one of his friends into loving him, which is just a thing that is effectively unforgivable. And then the whole book is going to be about like, how much can he forgive himself? How much can she forgive him? How much can the world forgive him? How much can Peter reckon with this original sin of his life while he continues to sin? Well, he continues to screw up and get Flamingo killed and like alienate Faith and like totally fail Torque. And I mean, just like everybody in Harbinger is failed by Peter Stanchik by the end of that book. And yet, throughout the run, Josh and the rest of the Valiant universe kind of insists that eventually Peter Stanchik is going to be this leader of men. He is going to be this paragon of humanity. He is going to be the next Toyo Harada, but in the best possible way. He's going to step up and actually be. It's like the Cyclops Xavier thing. Like he's going to eventually become the Xavier that Xavier couldn't be. He's going to become the Harada that Harada couldn't be. But there's really not a lot of path to that because Peter is fundamentally damaged in ways that are very, very hard for him to get over. So short of him retiring from being a superhero and going to therapy for 30 years, which doesn't make for a very exciting superhero book, we really had to reckon with like, what does Peter's correction look like? What does it mean for Peter Stanchik to be better? And how does he do that? And how does he get there? And so that's what, in coming onto the book, yeah, we're going to have, as Collin said, all these thematics that are core to what we tend to do. We're going to get political. It's part of what we do. We're going to get social. It's a big part of what we do. There's going to be a funny new supporting cast of kind of chaotic rebel characters who are going to remind you of our Joyride characters. Like a lot of that's going to be there in the book. But the core challenge is going to be, how do you make Peter Stanchik into a character that you care about and root for and want to do better and who has actually reckoned with the things that he's done and who can both be forgiven by himself, maybe be forgiven by some of the people in his life, and certainly be forgiven by the audience so that he can step forward into a better world. And I think that as a better version of himself. And that's something that like we both think we can write about pretty authentically as people who've made mistakes in our lives and we think is a really valuable story to be told with superheroes in general because again, one of the great things about Valiant is they're like normal people. They make it's, it's the old Stan Lee thing of like, they remind you of yourself because they make the same mistakes you do. And hopefully this can teach, it can be kind of teachable. Not that necessarily we're like qualified to teach, but like we're at least qualified to be introspective about our own growth. And I hopefully that can inspire other people, which is like what superheroes are all about.
Yeah, You two really are pitchers. You're so good at this. You're so fucking good at this.
It's because we have to verbalize everything to each other, man. If there's nothing said here that hasn't been something Collin and I have had to be like, what is this book about? Like, we actually have to talk this stuff out.
Yeah. As much as we are a hive mind that effectively share one brain, that brain does need to communicate to itself with a human's mouth. So, occasionally I call it going rogue, which is like when you're like, oh yeah, I definitely know what the right answer is here. I don't even need to talk about it. Like I'm in Jack's head. I know exactly what this needs to be, and then I do it, and he's like, You went rogue here, bud.
Like, this isn't the outline at all.
It's like, oh, I probably should have verbalized this with my human mouth. All right, well.
My human mouth. All right, so we talked about this a little bit before the recording, so let me just clarify. You're working on a DC story that is a retelling of Metal in a multiverse of Dark that comes out on the same day as all the other death metal tie-ins. But it is not, and I will quote you, not a death metal tie-in.
It is not a death metal tie-in. That is correct.
It is a Tales of the Dark multiverse story, reimagining, alternate take on the Metal event. Still overseen and guided by Scott Snyder, who, one might get confused, is also obviously in charge of death metal. Look, all of the pieces, and yes, this has metal in it as well, and features death prominently.
Man, you're really clarifying this, Collin.
So with this story, did you pitch for it, or were you offered an event? Because they're doing events for this series.
Right. So this was offered, which is rare for us. Not, it's rare for anybody at DC. Like, normally you're pitching. But this was we literally got a call from Dave Wielgos, who is our, he's been the editor on the last bunch of stuff that we've done over there. And he worked with us as an assistant back when we started. So he's been sort of with us on this whole ride, and is just a wonderful man, like just
awesome
and a great writer. Like, how dare he? But he called us up and he was like, hey, so we're doing Tales from the Dark Multiverse again. And we had pitched on the first run and didn't end up landing any of them. We pitched an absolutely insane couple of issues that it's not a surprise we didn't get. And so they came back to us and they were like, hey, we're doing Metal. Scott's working on it, like overseeing it, making sure it's awesome. But we want to just give it to y'all. Like, we know this is the big crazy chaos energy issue. It's like, and Dave has gotten in a habit of pitching us on, like, giving us Grant Morrison stuff, basically. Like, we did Batman 666, we did Crime Syndicate, we've done a bunch of stuff that are these sort of Morrison riffs. And since Collin and I, if you could point at anything and be like, who do you want to be? We'd be like, we want to be Morrison. It's like, they were like, hey, do you want to do Metal? And we were like, yeah, let's go nuts. What are the parameters? And they were like, there are no parameters. Pitch it to Scott. If Scott likes it, you're good. I was like, all right. So we looked back at Metal, and Dark Multiverse is always this sort of what if idea of what happens if, like, something goes terribly wrong in the initial event, right? Tynan's Infinite Crisis was, what if Blue Beetle went supervillain and, like, took over Brother Eye and, like, killed all the superheroes and, like, took over the world. Our version of Metal is, okay, well, then what if at that climactic moment in the original Metal, when Barbatos the Bat Dragon has taken Bruce Wayne and has taken all of these things, and he's effectively conquered the multiverse, and he's about to drag it all into the Dark Multiverse. What if right before that happens, when the Justice League put on their armor of Element X and are just ready to go knock him out, what if Barbatos had not had a loophole with the Element X? What if instead he had gotten ahead of that loophole and the Element X was already corrupted, so the minute the Justice League put it on, they all became his puppets? What if the minute that they did that, it melted their physical forms and turned the Justice League into 80-foot tall dragons that were controlled exclusively by Barbatos? Well, then Barbatos would win, and he would drag the multiverse into the Dark Multiverse, and all Earths would die, and Barbatos would run everything. And our pitch was, well, okay, what if Duke Thomas got away? What if because he was, especially because he's been such a big part of Scott's run up until then. And we, at the very beginning of Metal, we learned that Duke can see the past. That's like his meta power. He can see things the way they used to be. He has these sort of light construct ability. We're like, well, that's a really beautiful power to have if they've lost. Because it means that everything that he's looking at, all of the devastation, all the rubble, all the dragons, all this other stuff, when he sees it, he sees the people he knew and loved, the world that he knew and loved. He sees what used to be. And he would have to like have like goggles on to like make sure he doesn't always see that, because it would be devastating. And once we hit that and we were like, okay, well now you've got an emotional core of like the world as it was before to the world that it could be, how you save a world that's already fallen apart, how you fight for something when there's nothing left to fight for. That all feels very Metal. And then at that point, you're just filling it as was Scott and Greg's great, I think, win with Metal. You're just filling it with the most badass stuff you can possibly find. So then it just becomes a great jam session where Collin and I got to sit there and go, who do you want to bring in, man? And it was like Nightwing, but he has a guitar made of all of the previous power rings. It's like, oh yeah, all right. Who do you want to bring in? It's
how about Detective Chimp? But I don't know, what can we do with Detective Chimp? Like, we got like Red Tornado. I don't know. Maybe maybe Detective Chimp is wearing Red Tornado as a mecha suit.
Oh, I like that. All right, cool. We're gonna do that. Like Hawkman and Hawkgirl are still there, but like now Hawkgirl is like, Hawkgirl's like a normal person, but Hawkman is a 70-foot tall dragon because he was turned into the Hawkman dragon at the end of Metal and like hasn't turned back. So now they're like a cool mismatched couple who like can't be with each other. That's lovely and like interesting. Like this was the process, and it just became this fun jam sesh where we were like, this character, no this character, no this thing, no that thing, and put it all together around Duke to let Duke have this final face-off with Batman, who is Barbatos, who is the dragon, who is the villain, and let Duke be the last person sort of standing for the mantle of Batman in a world where Batman has ruined everything. And it was like, that just felt really fun and really dynamic and really emotional, which was all the stuff that we wanted out of Metal and all the stuff that Metal did so well. And we're like, all right, well, there it is. So we pitched it to Scott, and Scott effectively gave us the go-ahead, and has just been a supporter and a champion, and has really just backed our play here, which we could not possibly thank him enough for, because we were basically coming in and playing a cover version of his story. So it's an ultimate honor for us. And then Carl Mostert rolled in and delivered what is easily the best single issue of artwork you're going to get all year. Like just I cannot overhype this book enough. Like the art is just insane. I don't know how Carl does it. He's a superstar.
Yeah,
he's incredible.
He's amazing. And like, we put impossible challenges in front of him, because, obviously we wanted to fill every single panel with as much Metal fucking rock and roll as we possibly could, and then we were like, here, you fix this. This sounds like an artist's problem to me. And it was so funny because every time he'd send in pages,
every time,
like, guys, I know this is hot trash, but I just, I really hope you like it. And every single page is the kind of face melting guitar solo that you dream of getting, maybe like one or two pages in a book. And this is every goddamn page. Like basically when this book drops, we're going to go hit up Carl. We're going to take all the money we made off this book. And be Carl, I want to put all this money back into your pocket, and you're going to give me all of the pages.
Yeah, it's gnarly how much I want half these pages on my wall. They're crazy good.
How did you go about assembling the writer's room for Star Trek Year 5?
That was all Chase Moritz and Denton Tipton at IDW. We were lucky enough to get selected to showrun. We hilariously, they had all the other writers first. So the way that it worked was because they had a bunch of people pitch, and then we got selected to showrun. We came in with like, here's what the whole arc is, and they were like, great, we're going to do that arc. And then they hired Jody and Brandon and Jim, and Jody Hauser's one of our best friends. Yep. Like nary a day goes by that I don't talk to Jody in some way or another. We're in a bunch of RPGs together. We work together. We're just friends. We have the same like beer club memberships. We're very on the same page. And so I got a text from Jody that was like, congratulations. And I was like, I don't know what you're congratulating me for. And she was like, oh, never mind. And I was like, oh, okay. And I think I texted Collin and I was like, buddy, I think we got Star Trek.
Yeah. But no, that was a great. And then they were effective. Like, here's your room, and we're like, okay, no notes.
Yeah,
Perfect.
exactly. They were
Great.
all people we'd wanted to work with. Like Jim was somebody I'd respected a lot and had never met. Brandon was somebody who I had met and who I'd always wanted to work with. And obviously, like Jody is Jody. So it was very easy to just be like, oh, these guys are all this is like a perfect squad.
Sticking with the space and what I've liked to talk about the most in this interview, Joyride really lived up to its name of being fun and creative. What was the inspiration for it?
What was the inspiration for it? I mean, it's interesting. At its kind of core, like at least broadly, Jack and I had been running around with the idea for a while of like, well, what's it like to steal a spaceship? Right? Like, what's this going to look like? Like, man, like it'd be so cool to just grab one of those bad boys and get out of here, see what else is in the, in the universe, see what else is in the world. That's such a cool, interesting way to get in on a story.
We had a movie we were literally in the process of pitching called Grand Theft Starship. That was the thing we were working on.
And then at the same time, obviously, we've been working with Marcus Toe on Hacktivist, and Marcus is not only an absolute treasure of a human being, but he's just one of the goddamn greatest artists working in the medium today. So we're like, well, damn, how can we work more with Marcus? Because we really want to lock this down. We want him to be our forever friend. And we were chatting with him about things he liked, and he pulled out this old comic, his very first comic he'd ever done, called Maximum Velocity.
He'd written it in high school and like drawn like 25 issues of it in high school that he'd never released. They were just like, pencil drawings that he's done. I have all of it. Maximum Velocity. It looks like it's because he's learning, so he kind of looks like Rob Liefeld. It's like early Marcus Toe.
Yeah. But so we were like, oh, cool, dude. What's Maximum Velocity about? It's like, oh, it's about these kids on like a future shitty Earth who like steal a spaceship. And our kind of brains broke a little bit, and we said, hey, that's interesting. What an interesting idea. And we started jamming on concepts and ideas. And, thematically, what we really settled on was this idea of, grabbing, I think, we like to describe it as like, it's a story about, like all of us know, stealing your parents' car and getting the fuck out of town, running away effectively from all the toxic bullshit that's surrounding your life and seeking something better out in the universe, out in the next town over, up the coast, down the street, whatever is defined as not here. So you can really kind of find who you are outside of the confines of what your crib, what your little nest has forced you to be. And that story is something that absolutely resonated with Jack and I. We both come from small towns. And I think we both really kind of found our way once we left. And same with Marcus. And we realized that this was kind of a story that we all wanted to tell, and in an optimistic tone. Right, there's definitely like Maximum Velocity is a little grimdark. I think Grand
Theft Starship was going to be like a Nolan thing, like, and it wasn't going to be, but it was probably going to aim for that tone. Like, it was going to aim for being something much more serious and like heisty, or maybe Ocean's 11-y. Like, it wasn't going to be youthful. And we had a moment. I remember it very vividly. It's the same day that Uma and Katrin and David were like born, where we were sitting there and we had to take a moment and be like, are we going to do this? Because if we do Joyride, we can't do this other thing. This other project dies and becomes this. And we just and it was like, well, we had a movie that we could go pitch, and it's a pretty killer like movie pitch. We could just go do it, and we'll probably make more money off of it. Should we do that, or should we do this thing that is clearly more exciting? And I was like, well, we're going to do the thing that's clearly more exciting for sure. And especially because it's a chance to work with Marcus again, which like is what we want to be doing, regardless of money. And so that decision was made entirely because it was something we felt like we really had to say. Also, we were cresting into our mid to late 20s at the time, like in our late 20s, certainly at the time. And it was really important to us to write something about our early 20s. Like, it was exciting to get a chance to write something about being young and messing up and being excited and not knowing what was going to be in that next club and kissing the sexy Birdman. Like, that was kissing the sexy Birdman was like one of the original. I think we came up with that on day one, because that's what the whole book is about. It's about taking those stupid risks that you shouldn't be taking, because you never know what's going to happen to you next. And when you're in your early 20s and you're especially, like, we were in a big city, like, when you're in those situations where you have all these opportunities and all this crazy stuff and nothing is holding you back for the first time in your life, you make a lot of dumb decisions, but you also make a lot of really pivotal, exciting, interesting decisions. And so that idea of, like, steal it, like, Earth sucks, steal a spaceship, go find yourself, was the whole. That was it, man. It was a way to get stuff that was very personal to us, but stuff that was also very fun, and then got to be loose and crazy because of the way that we worked on it. We didn't do full script. The only book we've ever done where we didn't do full script. We did screenplay, and we handed it to Marcus, and Marcus paneled it. So we didn't call what was on each page from a panel perspective. We just told him what was happening and what the dialogue was. And he went and took everything to, full, which meant that there's things like Joyride issue 3 that get, like, really abstract and really strange. And I mean, if I were to show you those pages, they wouldn't look like comic book pages. They look like poems. And, they were written in, like, liminal states at, like, 1 a.m. when we were like, I don't know, this is like, I don't know how else to describe this. And because we were working with Marcus, who's, such a good friend and such a good, and such an incredible artist, we could do that. Like, that jam process could function that way. So that's Joyride.
So I know when we spoke earlier, when I interviewed you before, you mentioned a playlist for Harbinger. So I went ahead and I was like, I'll send a DM. Why not? Because I want to hear it.
Yeah.
Do you make those for everything y'all work on, or is that something that just comes out for certain projects? And how does music inspire your work?
We create them for most projects. Not all of them, but for most of them. Some projects are just, so music inspires us primarily because it keeps us on the same page. I genuinely think it's a way to make sure that the two of us are in the same tone. Because as much as we are two brains that are one, we're also still two brains. So, one of us might have a slightly different tone concept than the other one, and before we get to taking a draft and making sure that it all feels right, part of our process is just making sure that the other guy knows what's in your head. So Collin will put songs on the table and I'll put songs on the table, and we'll talk about, like, what do you think is a good track for this? And we'll eventually figure out a playlist. Some things, it's just a soundtrack. Like, we're doing a thing right now, it's like an interactive theater project, and everything that we've been doing on it, I told you, man, we work in every medium. And that project, I've used the same album. I mean, it's been something like 100 hours of work on this project at this point, and that thing has just been the Darkest Hour soundtrack, like the movie, the Gary Oldman movie. It's been the Darkest Hour soundtrack on repeat over and over and over for 100 hours, and it's just to make sure that and now it's Pavlovian. Like, I had to do a little bit of it earlier, and I was trying to do it without it, and it was hard. And I turned it on, and immediately it was like a spigot opened. I was like, oh, now I can write this. And I think that becomes true for a lot of our projects.
For the first, I don't know, maybe 5 years, 6 years of our writing career, we didn't even branch out that much. We had one playlist that we just listened to obsessively. And even now, that first track hits, and immediately my spine straightens and my hands come up, and I'm ready to work. It is the surefire, like, way to defeat writer's block, because effectively we've trained ourselves with those tunes to it's work time.
Life Prowler by No Age is the first song on. Life Prowler by No Age. It's a playlist called Music That Makes Words Happen. It's actually public on my Spotify. So if you search for my Spotify and go to my very first playlist, it's called Music That Makes Words Happen. And I know several writers who use it. because we talked about it pretty early in our career, and so I know Andrew Roston uses it. I know a bunch of people have used it over time and it's helped them sort of get to that Pavlovian state as well.
That's awesome. I just wrote it down too.
Nice.
So, okay, Jake, you want to take the big one?
Oh, so if you had to make a Rube Goldberg machine, what would its purpose be?
Well, I answered the sandwich question first. So, Jack, this is you, bud.
Got him.
Trying to come up with one that isn't incriminating. Let's see. I mean, honestly, I would really love a Rube Goldberg machine that made beer. If I could have like a private still or whiskey, like if I could have like a private liquor still, doesn't really matter what kind of liquor, but that I could just I press I throw a little ball down a chute, or I get a pneumatic tube moving or something. If I got that going, and then in 30 minutes after a hilarious run of weirdness, I had like an old fashioned. Maybe it wouldn't even have to be a still. Maybe it would just make me a perfect old fashioned. That sounds great. I'd be down. And it would save me a little bit of time because I'm obsessive about that stuff otherwise. So having a mechanically perfect one sounds great to me. Mitch Gerrans is like somewhere, like the force just went through him. He's like, oh, somebody just talked about making an old fashioned with a machine. But
so I like that because it's practical. It's going to give you something that you love, that you need, that you can then imbibe. That's great. I'm gonna go in an opposite direction. This is completely impractical. So anyone who really knows Collin Kelly knows that there's really two fundamental touchstones for just understanding me. One of them, we've touched on it already. It's dragons. I love them. Love those big scaly bastards. They're fantastic. The other thing, swords. Big sword fan over here. Got a bunch of them. Bladed weapons. It's just kind of my jam. I'm not going to say that I studied the blade, but I have studied the historic European martial art, also known as HEMA, which is the traditional long sword, Blausfechten style of long sword dueling.
I've seen videos of him doing it. It's awesome.
So I'm pretty into it, but it's not just about using the sword, it's about the sword life. So what I would really like is a Rube Goldberg machine that was able to pluck each individual blade out of my sword collection, polish and sharpen each blade while also swinging them around, catching the light in really bitchin' cool ways, while also kind of clanging off each other so that it's kind of like a disco battlefield all around me that then ends up with my full arsenal cleaned, polished, and ready to kill.
Disco Battlefield coming soon from Image Comics.
That topped our best one, which was Ram V making a singularity. That didn't expect that.
Take that, Ram. Take that. It's the only time we'll ever be better than Ram. Ever. Take that.
Love that guy and his stupid, beautiful work.
Goddamn Ram. I took that guy out for fried chicken once, and he ate it more talented than me.
Didn't even make a mess. It was very embarrassing for you.
Monster.
You just got grease stains down your shirt. It was
right. They ended up on me somehow. The waiter came by and put him on the top 10 best chicken list, and I pretended like I wasn't even there.
Just handed you the check.
Yeah.
Well, where can people find you online, and what projects should they be picking up?
So you can find me at Jackson Lanzing on Twitter. That's JACKSONLANZING, not Lanzig, which everyone wants to spell my name that way, but it's not. Fuck you, Danzig. Jackson Lanzing on Twitter, or Found in the Wild on Instagram if you really want to see just like pictures of my cat and like food that I sometimes post. And my recommendations for stuff that people should pick up from us this holiday season. The first two trades of Star Trek Year 5 are out. So for the Star Trek fan in your life, you literally couldn't get them a cooler gift. I'm so proud of this book. We didn't talk about it a lot tonight, but it's the culmination of, decades of us just loving and breathing and enjoying Star Trek so much. So please support that book. And Dark One from Vault, which is only pre-orderable through Vault right now. And because of COVID, it's just been delayed for ages, but it'll finally be on shelves in May for people to actually read and check out. And I'm just deeply, deeply proud of that work. Nathan Gooden and us just did a really wonderful job on it. So I'm very proud of it.
I mean, as you should be. It's very well done.
It's a hell of a book.
On the internet, I am at CP Kelly. C as in cat, Paul Kelly. I don't know, Paul. That's not my
Cat Paul Kelly.
Cat Paul Kelly. That's what they call me. CP Kelly on Twitter. And my recommendation for the book that you should pick up from us is Tales of the Dark Multiverse Metal, which is out. Jack, when's that bad boy dropping on shelves?
December 29th. December 29th. And Star Trek Year 5 number 17, which is a one-shot that it just kicks ass. Just such a cool fucking weird little issue is coming out on the same day. So 29th, you're going to have two, or maybe that's coming out on the 16th. I could be wrong about that. But then between the 16th and the 29th, two great books to pick up from us.
End your 2020 the best way you possibly can with some high-quality hive mind content to ring in the new year.
You can find us at GateCrashers Pod on Twitter and Instagram, and now at our website at gatecrashers.fan.
Woo!
Yeah, it was a time. Finally got a website. It's been
A good one.
So someday we'll do another one of these, and I'll tell you the saga of trying to get joyride.com. Fucking 2001 face.
Well, thank you, and catch you in 2 weeks.
Thank you so much for having us, guys.
GateCrashers.